WrestlingStories.com.
Behold, the genius Lanny Poffo, the world's smartest man.
Sometimes what goes on behind the scenes is stronger than the soap opera on the video scope.
You're listening to the Genius Cast with Lanny Poffo and co-host JP Zarka of ProWrestlingStories.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the poet and limerick writing, motivational speaking brother of WWE Hall of Famer Randy Savage, the Genius, Leaping Lanny Poffo!
Hello, wrestling fans. This is Lanny Poffo, and this is
JP Zarka of ProWrestlingStories.com. And how you doing, Lanny?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking.
We're coming off the heels of a really memorable show on Mr. Perfect. Kurt was a fascinating, talented wrestler, and people, even 15 years after his death, all have the interest in the world for him. I just can't believe it's been 15 years already.
I can't believe it either. What a fantastic guy, and the greatest 4 months of my career was teaming with Mr. Perfect.
Listeners found your Regis and Kathy Lee story quite funny. Here you were told by Hennig backstage to leave the talking to him, yet you didn't want to sit up there with cameras rolling with your mouth shut if Regis asked you a question. It was quite a predicament to be in, but I think you did great in those 2 segments on the show.
Well, if somebody asks me a question, it's like it's a knee-jerk reaction. And, the thing is, I didn't want to rehash negativity. It's an imperfect world. We survived it. A lot of people thought that it was a very entertaining 2 segments.
Now, before we started recording, you and I were talking about travel. We mentioned Australia, and you brought up a hilarious story about how you spent your free time while you were on a trip down under in 1980. Do you want to tell our listeners about that?
Well, I got on the plane. I'd been to Sydney, Perth, Melbourne, and Brisbane, and back to Sydney because we were going to fly out of Sydney. And I sat down and I said, man, my butt is itchy. I couldn't figure it out. My butt is itching. What was it? And I said, oh no. I had been the day before in a nude beach. My butt had never seen the light of day. And I was out there a little too long and I got a big rosy red butt. And I said, well, that's great. I'm going to be sitting on this red butt for the next 2 days. So much for the genius. I am the one wrestler that makes time to sightsee. And the only thing I didn't get to do is see the Great Barrier Reef. But, when you're in Sydney, Perth, Melbourne, and Brisbane, and then you go, there's no time for sightseeing. But I got to see a lot of great things. The best thing I saw was in Perth. A 10-year-old Aborigine girl came up to me and said, Lanny, you were my favorite wrestler. And she smiled, and I said, oh, wow, that just made my whole trip. And she was so beautiful, a little Aborigine girl. And I said, oh, wow, thank you. And I gave her a Frisbee, and I would have given her anything.
It's amazing the reach you have with fans all across the world in places you would least expect.
It was a great moment. I still think about it.
Now, for a special treat to start our show, we're going to have Lanny on the line from Tokyo. What we're going to do is for the next couple weeks is we've got a few interviews coming up that we pre-recorded before Lanny's trip to Tokyo. But at the time of this recording, it's Saturday, 2 days before this drops. I just want to see how things are going out there with you, Lanny. How are things in Tokyo?
Oh, fantastic. I love it here. It's the first time I've ever been to Tokyo, and everybody's busting their butt to please me. And of course, I take advantage. I'm just kidding. It's just that everybody at New Japan, they are so polite and professional. And I'm very, very happy. And, if I was going to go to Japan, I wanted to do it now while I'm still young enough to enjoy it.
Absolutely. Now, you've been out there commentating, doing the Road to Power struggle for New Japan. And, a lot of listeners, a lot of fans of New Japan product are hearing your voice for the first time. How are you feeling about things so far?
I love it here. Everybody's so nice to me. The food is great. I was actually in Shibuya Crossing, and I put that on my Facebook page. I love it here. It's just the people are so respectful, and they try to be nice. They're earnest. everybody's a team. They want to help me. I am new to this. I'm not new to wrestling, but I'm new to putting a headset on. There is a learning curve, and I hope they put up with me because I do love it here.
You've been in Japan now for a few days. What do you have going on next over the next few days?
Well, I was actually supposed to leave on the 30th, just in time for Halloween.
Right.
But they asked me if I would stay over for Osaka, which is going to be on November 3rd, which means I am now leaving on November 4th. And, of course, I said yes, and I told you I had to cancel that other booking from Cleveland,
right?
Which I hated to do because, I hate doing that, but I had to do it because these people have my priority. I love it here. Everybody is so nice to me, and I feel relevant again.
One of my favorite parts of you doing this so far is you called Suzuki Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Do you fear your life now?
No, I don't fear my life. I just, he's a tough shooter. There was a sport called Pancrase where he took a very dear friend of mine, Ken Shamrock, and not only beat him, but destroyed him and tried to hurt him. And I don't think there's any place for that in any kind of wrestling, whether it's mixed martial arts or ever. We can find out who the better man is without killing the guy. And he basically killed my friend, Ken Shamrock, who is now alive, but I mean, it was dicey for a while there. If somebody taps out, let him up. Release your hold.
Now, how's the morale been in the back? Did you get a chance to meet some of the guys?
Oh, actually, I haven't been with the guys. I'm all, being by myself with the announcing team. So it's two different animals. I'll probably get a chance to meet a lot of the guys on the bus going to Osaka.
So I don't want to keep you on too long because of the time difference. At the moment, it's 10:36 p.m. and you just got done commentating your second night out there. What's next for you? What are you going to be doing when you wake up tomorrow?
I've got a couple of days off, and then I'm going to wait for further instructions because, I don't have a car. You don't really need one here because everything is mass transit, just like London, just like New York, except it's better here.
So that's good. You get some time to actually sightsee and go out and maybe try some of the foods, look at the different sites and so on.
Yes, I've already tried a lot of the foods, But I joined the Admirals Club on American Airlines. I got a lot of nice food there. But when I went to Dallas, I had such a tight connection, I couldn't try out their Admirals Club, and I heard it was great.
Right. So now you're going to go out and try some of the Japanese food. We know you're a vegetarian. Are you going to be trying some sushi out there?
Oh, listen. When I was in Ecuador, I ate cuy because when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
That's right.
I've already had sushi. I've already had all types of Japanese cuisine. And I am a health nut. But when I'm on the road, I live as the Romans do. And when I get back home, I'll go back 100% strict.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, for coming in and telling us how things are going out there. We'll catch up before next week's show, and we'll see how things are going. But until then, all the best to you and enjoy your time out there.
I want to thank all the fans for making this show a huge success. And I promise you, this show will go on whether I am in Japan or not in Japan. It's going to be my priority. I love the Genius Cast, and I appreciate the fans taking us straight up with a bullet every week. We get more and more visitors. The word is out on us. You've got the quality, JP. You've got the editing skills, and the music comes in just right. And everybody loves what you do. And I'm very proud to be a part of it. It's first class all the way.
I appreciate that, Lanny. Kick some ass out there. Talk soon.
Thank you.
We are incredibly honored to have almost 40-year legend of the ring, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, on our show today. Thank you for being with us here on the Genius Cast.
Well, thanks very much, JP. But the first thing Hacksaw Jim Duggan's got to do is get a big ho!
Ho!
Kind of fires me up nowadays. Hey, that's a pretty good ho, brother. I always give Ric Flair the business. Rick always goes, woo, woo. And I'm like, Rick, are your trunks too tight or what? It's more like a ho!
I think we could put the ho up against woo any day of the week.
I don't know. Flair is one of the best, man, and good friends. That's what I give him the business.
We hope to get him on the show one of these days. Well, thank you for being with us. I got a bunch of questions prepared, and of course, we'll have some time for you and Lanny to catch up too. But I want to take things right back to the start. For our listeners who do not know, You were a football, track, wrestling, and basketball star in high school. You won the New York State High School Wrestling Championship in the unlimited weight class division, and you were recruited by Ohio State University to play for their storied football program. But instead, you opted to play for Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. What was your reasoning behind going to SMU over Ohio State?
Well, JP, we hear so many hard luck stories in wrestling about guys growing up in a rough atmosphere and a horrible family life. I grew up in the States. It's called Mayberry, a TV show. It was a great upbringing. I have 3 older sisters. My family's very close to this day. My dad, God bless him, was chief of police in my town. So I had a really nice upbringing. So my high school career was, like I said, I had a really nice high school career. I won the state wrestling championship, unlimited, undefeated my senior year. My shot put record from 1973 still stands today. I'm like, get those kids some Cheerios up there or something, It's been almost 40 years, and football was my main sport. So I was lucky enough to be recruited by Ohio State, Penn State, many huge powerhouses. But the offensive line coach, which the position I played, was from SMU, Southern Methodist in Dallas. He kept coming up to Glens Falls, upstate New York, with a big cowboy hat and cowboy boots back in the 70s. My mom fell in love with him, and it was a good decision because Ohio State, I would have been just a number. I went down to SMU. I was able to start as a freshman. I had a record for consecutive starts down there. I was captain of the team. I was all Southwest Conference. I had a great career down there at SMU. But the biggest thing about that decision, JP, is that's where I met Fritz Von Erich, and he opened up the door to professional wrestling.
Yeah, that's right. You ended up meeting him, and he kind of recruited you into the wrestling business. Now, you did fantastic when you were at SMU. You were voted team captain of the football team, and you got a bachelor's degree in applied plant biology. Have you ever used that degree in your life?
No, not too much, because I came, through college. And the main thing I expected, I wasn't actually a wrestling fan growing up. I was consumed with football. Back in the 70s, the Green Bay Packers were a powerhouse football team here in America, and I just wanted to play for the Packers for 20 years, And so after football, my main concern was to stay eligible during school. I wasn't a very good student, but I was able to stay eligible, and then I went to the Atlanta Falcons, where I had 2 knee surgeries during preseason. So I was on injury reserve all year. I went up to Canada. I played a little bit, 78 up there. Saw I had no real future in professional football. Gave Fritz Von Erich a call, and he opened up the door. He gave me the huge gift. Because back then, JP, wrestling was a closed business. Now everybody knows a wrestler. Back then, there was a handful of wrestlers, and kayfabe was very strong. You wouldn't get in the dressing room. You wouldn't see the guys around. It was a huge gift for Fritz Von Erich to take an outsider like me, give me that gift. Because back then it was mostly a family show, like Lanny, like you said, the Poffos, the Von Erichs, DiBiase, Jake the Snake Roberts, Kurt Hennig. Many of the guys' fathers were in wrestling. You go on, and then to have Fritz open up that door, it was a huge gift to me. And me and Von Erich are close to this day over it.
You also trained under Samoan wrestling promoter Peter Maivia, the grandfather of The Rock. You certainly had some great people showing you the ropes.
Well, I like to say, JP, I wrestled The Rock's grandfather, I wrestled The Rock's father, and I may get The Rock at WrestleMania. Hey! No chance in hell. No chance in hell, as Vince would say,
Well, you never know. You're still young.
Compared to Hogan and Flair, I am.
Right.
But anyway, no, we're both good friends. But anyway, I left Fritz down there in Texas, and I came up and I worked for Vince McMahon Sr., the WWF. And I was doing jobs for Angelo Mosca and Ken Patera and Stan Hansen. And I was wrestling as Big Jim Duggan back then, short hair and clean shaven. And they sent me off to learn wrestling and to be sent of all places to learn Hawaii. So, as a young guy, we weren't making no money, but I met one of my best friends of my life out there, Haku, Meng, that I've known since 1979. And, back then we were making, $30, $40 a week, 5 guys living in a little 1-room apartment. But we were all young guys learning the ropes and paying our dues.
Now, I've got a lot of interest in the Dallas Sportatorium. You spent a lot of the early part of your career there. Now, despite it being known as this iconic venue where legends such as yourself, the Von Erichs, the Freebirds, Jake the Snake Roberts, a young Stone Cold Steve Austin, even Elvis, he walked through those doors when he was playing music there. By all accounts, and pardon my French, it's been described as a bit of a shithole. Now, we did a piece up on ProWrestlingStories.com about the Sportatorium where Gary Hart, he describes the building as nothing more than a leaky tin building with uncomfortable wooden benches that had no backs, and it'd be 110 degrees in the summer and colder than you can even imagine in the winter. Paul Bearer, he used the quote to describe it as, "It may not be a church, but it's certainly holy ground." Tell me your memories and experiences working in the iconic Sportatorium.
Well, coming out of a football background, it's a huge change. American football, obviously. In our sport, you have a helmet on, you have shoulder pads, you have 10 other guys around you. The fans are 50 yards away from you. All of a sudden, I'm in professional wrestling where you're in the ring, the fans are 5 feet from you, and you're dressed in a pair of short shorts and patent leather boots. It's a terrifying ordeal when I was a young guy. So even wrestling in a relatively small arena, but still, like I said, holy ground, the Sportatorium. It was nerve-wracking for Big Jim Duggan to be out there in front of those people and trying to learn my trade.
Now, later on, you went over to Mid-South. You were a very successful heel as part of the Rat Pack with Ted DiBiase and Matt Borne before you turned babyface. What was the heel heat like for top heels in Mid-South in those days?
Well, back then it was a whole different deal. Before it was sports entertainment. Bill Watts, Mid-South, they had a waiver. You wanted to try one of the wrestlers, you signed the waiver, you get in the ring. Of course, you get in the ring, they put you in there with like Dr. Death Steve Williams or somebody like that, and they pull their legs off them. But, working with DiBiase, any of the second-generation guys, like I said, the Poffos, DiBiase, Jake, Henning, they're just that little more polished than the rest of us. And I learned an awful lot from Ted DiBiase. He's a very good wrestler, knows the actual business of wrestling, in-ring work. And I learned a lot from Ted working with him. Like I said, it was just very dangerous back then, getting back and forth from the ring. The people would spit on you and punch at you and kick you. So it was a hazard deal. And I tell the story. It's in my book, Hacksaw Jim Duggan story. I'll give that a little plug. So I was out in West Texas, like Lubbock, Amarillo, and I'm in the back of the dressing room, all covered with bullies and bruises. My mentor, pretty much back in the day, was Bruiser Brody. And we were working for Joe Blanchard, Tully Blanchard's dad, the Southwest Championship Wrestling. And Brody came in, he looks at me, he goes, "Duggan," he says, "if you carry something to the ring, carry something you can use. Forget those feathered bows and sequin robes." And I looked down, I'm like, "Well, here's a piece of wood." And I came out yelling, waving that piece of wood. It was like parting the Red Sea. Those folks scattered. I got to the ring, and I've been carrying it ever since. It's been a great gimmick. I walk into an arena with my good friend Jake the Snake, and I'd say, "Can somebody find me a board and get him a 10-foot python?"
One is probably easier to find than the other.
Yeah, a little easier to find. Yeah, he had to drag that snake around wherever he went.
I want to bring up Matt Borne. We mentioned him earlier. Now, there's a video of you guys online having a match that turned into a bit of a shoot. Tell me about your relationship with him, because by all accounts, he seemed to be a bit of a grouchy guy.
Well, there's a lot of history there, Matt and I. Like I said, we were part of the Rat Pack way back in the early 80s, and we had a few exchanges, let's say, back in the dressing room. DiBiase witnessed Bernie Ladd broke one up. But anyway, like I said, I had a good damage career, so I did okay. And, it's hard to say, because Matt's passed away, so I'm not going to talk bad about the guy, but that's one of the huge misconceptions of wrestling. People, well, you guys are all good friends, aren't you? No, we're not all good friends. You have a few friends, you have a lot of acquaintances, and you have a couple of enemies. And Matt Borne was my enemy.
Now, Lanny was just talking about recently, he was just at All In on September 1st, saying how the backstage area, everyone got along. How would you say the backstage area now compares to how it was back then?
The dressing room, was a lot of fun, especially, Mid-South with Lenny and I tell you, we had a lot of fun with the soap monster and, all kinds of stuff. It was a fun atmosphere, but still there, everybody was competing for a job, but everybody got along too, because you don't want any open hostilities. Nowadays, I think the kids now are much more professional. Back in the day, you'd walk in the dressing room, a couple of guys might have been up all night and be sleeping up underneath the table, guys out messing around with the women. Nowadays, you go to the show, the kids all got their phones or their laptops, and they're, I think the kids may be even more athletic, but I don't think they're as creative as our generation. I mean, our generation of guys was the golden age of wrestling. I mean, you can name 10 guys without thinking: Macho, Jake, Junkyard Dog, DiBiase. Just name after name just comes off. So, and Lanny and I were lucky enough to be part of that golden age.
The good old days. Now, when you were with Watts, you played this fierce heel character, and then when you went to New York under Vince, you played a babyface that was geared more towards the kids. What role did you prefer?
Well, actually, I joke, because back in the old days, I chopped a lot of meat, like you said, down there in Mid-South, me and Matt Borne would beat the devil. One-man gang, I joke, I said, I've had easier street fights and lost working with one-man gang. He beat the hell out of you. Right. But, as I got older, my persona, like I said, changed. And at one point, when I was the king of wrestling, I had the cape, the crown, the flag, the board, the thumb, the tongue, the hole, and the crossed eyes, and I'd come back from the dressing room and Strongbow would be like, Duggan, you want to be a little more serious in the ring. I'm like, what are you talking about? And Bobby Heenan would be like, Vince, Duggan needs an eagle. He should get Duggan an eagle. Like, Bobby, shut up. Thinking an eagle is a joke to carry around, But also, as my character, I survived much longer. You can't survive long chopping meat like that. And I joke, I said, to this day, I'm the last of the old timers with all my original body parts. Everybody else has got a new knee, a new hip, a new shoulder. I said, Hacksaw Duggan comes in the original package. So doing, you look at Foley, Mick's 10, 12 years younger than me, and, what sacrificed his body for wrestling. But now as an older guy, I'm thinking he might be rethinking jumping off the roof.
Yeah. He and Taker, they're almost half bionic these days.
Well, and Hogan, look at Hogan,
Years of leg drops.
The big guy, but all those leg drops, year after year after year. I mean, it's no business. You're always a phony wrestler until you go to court. When you go to court, you're a trained killer. You're like, wait, I was a phony SOB that afternoon. The old wrestling joke goes like 10, 20, 30,000. Every time you hit him, the lawsuit goes up. Like, I'm going to sue you. I said, I'm getting my money's worth. We're not done. No, as Lanny used to tell you, if you meet 100 people, 99 folks are cool. But you always, that one guy will be like, you want to arm wrestle me? You look bigger on TV.
Oh, yeah. I bet you got a lot of guys trying to test you back in the day.
Yeah, and back in the day, I was 300 pounds and young and dumb. I mean, nowadays, if you're going to be somewhere, it's always good to have security. But I'll tell you a little story. I just did an autograph session here in South Carolina, and talked about security. I was looking in the line, and about 5, 6 people back in the line was this big, rough-looking man. And I'm like, checking around, see where my security is, and I'm signing autographs, and finally, this guy works his way up through the line, and he comes up and he squeezes my hand. He looks me in the eye. He goes, Hacksaw Duggan, me and my dad, we used to watch you on TV. It's humbling the way folks remember us wrestlers, a lot of generation of guys. I mean, what do you say? The guy got up, gave the guy a hug. He got teary-eyed thinking about watching Saturday afternoon wrestling with his family and with his dad and mom. And I'm sure it happens to Lanny. It happens to our generation and around the world. I love joking with the NFL, the American NFL guys over here. They're like, well, we're world champions. I'm like, where in the world have you boys been? Wrestling it's crazy. In my career, 40 years, I've wrestled every state in the Union, every province in Canada, in 31 different countries. It's amazing the appeal of wrestling around the world. We get a lot of people bring in and say, I used to watch this guy when I was your age, and It's hard to think of another sports personality from back then you remember besides a wrestler or a band. You know, who's playing back in the 80s and 90s. You know, you can think of 10 guys, name them. You know, it was a special generation of wrestlers, and you know, it was a moment in time, and it'll never be replicated. And because everybody was their own guy, you know, Junkyard Dog was Junkyard Dog, you know, Macho Man was Macho Man. Hacksaw, he's in here with me too, brother. I mean, but they weren't saying, okay, you're going to be so-and-so, you know, what you saw on TV is who they were.
What were your thoughts on JYD? Because he was with Watts' promotion with you as well as in WWF.
Yeah, Dog and I were pretty good buddies. And of course, working as a bad guy, you know, and I wore a gorilla suit, and Ted DiBiase and I conspired to beat Dog, so he had to leave the territory. But he came back underneath a mask as Stagger Lee, and we could never unmask him to prove it was Dog. But anyway, I was wrestling him down in New Orleans, which was his home territory. And I'm back in the dressing room, and the whole arena is chanting. And in New Orleans, they have a who dat. It's a who dat and they're like, who dat, who dat, who dat going to beat the Dog, who dat. The whole building, to this day I remember, was just vibrating. And it was, they hated me. And I came out and the place was just livid. And I'm working with JY, and he's like, you know, get some more heat on me, Hacksaw. I'm like, BS, Dog, make your comeback, brother.
When you get that type of heat, you know you're doing something right.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it wasn't sports entertainment. You know, people believed it, and it was believable. I mean, you know, when Nikolai Volkov and Crusher Khrushchev walked to the ring, you look up at him going, holy smokes. It's not like when AJ Styles, you know, skips on down the ring going, geez, I think Bob at the gas station could kick his ass. You know, it's a different business.
Yeah, and then these guys had to fear their lives, so it was good to have gimmicks like a 2x4 to protect you. You know, when you signed in WWF in January '87, your first major appearance was at WrestleMania 3. That must have been quite the experience for you, being in front of 90,000 plus at the Pontiac Silverdome. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, obviously, it was a huge part to, you know, a moment in my career to be in front of 93, largest crowd I have been in front of. Of course, we were close over there at Wembley Stadium. I think we were like in the high 80s in Wembley. Yeah. But 93,000 Pontiac Silverdome. I ran down. I hit the Iron Sheik. I hit Nikolai Volkov with my 2x4. I'm standing in the middle of the ring with my American flag and having 93,000 folks chanting USA. Yeah, a thrill of a lifetime, brother. You know, it was something I'll always remember. Of course, I joke. I said I came back to the dressing room and everybody's like, Duggan, how's the crowd out there? And I'm like, well, without my glasses, the first 3 rows are full. I don't know what the hell else is out there.
Tell me about the sound. What was it like to be in the center of the ring in front of all those people? Because I know in arenas you got a different sound than being in a dome or outside. You
know, I had wrestled in front of, you know, I played football in front of, you know, thousands of people before. You know, Mid-South, we'd run the Superdome, and we'd have 40, 50,000 people at the Dome. They were, you know, Von Erichs were running Texas Stadium. The business was hot back then. So, but 93,000, that was, you know, something exceptional. And just a thrill to be part of it. You know, to this day, you can say, yep, part of WrestleMania 3, the big one. Of course, they beat it at Texas, but everybody will remember, you know, 3. Hogan, Andre.
And Randy Steamboat, too.
Yeah. You didn't kid, the whole card was loaded, man. And I tell you that, back then you flip through, you know, they were running 3 towns a night. You know, they had 3 A, B, and C teams running. And all 3 towns were hot shows. I mean, you had Warrior on one, Macho on the other, Hogan on the third. I mean, everything was cooking. And, of course, back then it was a lifestyle. It was, you know, people say, that's a rough job. And it's a lifestyle. And people would try to compare you to other sports teams. I said, no, we're not like a sports team. You're more like a rock and roll band, and you're on a sports team. You know, different city every night, different country. And, you know, then back, I joke, I said, in the old days, the booze, the women, the drugs. Man, I miss the old days. That was a different time in life.
Do our listeners a favor and share a typical story of being on the road during that time.
I did everything you can possibly do. It was a different time, a lot of drugs, a lot of everything. And, but, DiBiase and Terry Taylor, they'd go, and Ric Flair would go to a different club that me and Terry Gordy and Steve Williams would go to. They'd be at the GQ club, and me and Gordy and Doc be down to some pool hall where the smoke is down to about shoulder level. Everything's painted black. Everybody's drinking whiskey. It was me, Gordy, and Doc ran a little different route than, Terry and Taylor and, those guys. And then some other guys would, just be in the women deal. Ricky and Robert, I said to the rest of us, we could just get the overflow. We'd be okay.
Did you ever get tough guys try it on with you on the road while you were out there? I know we mentioned this earlier, but in the bars when the liquid courage is there?
Back in the day, you have a lot of fights. And there was in Mid-South, and of course, back then in the early 80s, they wouldn't sue you and you wouldn't get arrested. You'd have a bar fight, the cops would come in, they're like, get the hell out of here, you get up, nobody be hurt bad, nobody's getting stabbed or run over or nothing, but, so you'd have a lot of fights. And I would tell people, I wouldn't try to do a plumber's job. A plumber shouldn't try to do my job. Every night I'm throwing punches, blocking punches. I get potatoes. I throw potatoes. It's pretty much what I do back in the day. So, especially, I joke, I'd be standing there with Dr. Death, somebody punch him in the face. Pow! Smash him, bust his lip out. Go, that's pretty good, brother. Come here. Let me show you the real deal. Yeah. So it was as probably rugby players, it's a tough group of men.
That's right. In '88, you were the first winner of the first ever Royal Rumble. Did you ever imagine it would grow to become this iconic event today?
No, I don't think anybody realized it would become, probably the top, 2 or 3 WWE events. But I don't think anybody realized how big the WWE would become back then. The worldwide powerhouse it is now, and that's why it was good. Because WWF was my heyday. But they brought me back as a talent in WWE. So I like to joke. I said WWF, I wrestled Dusty, DiBiase, and Orton. WWE, I wrestled DiBiase's kid, Dusty's kid, and Orton's kid.
Right,
So
exactly.
First I beat up the old man, then I beat up the kid. Sorry, fired up. Scared my neighbors.
I bet they're used to it. How was that idea pitched to you guys in the back? I heard Pat Patterson came up with that idea.
Yeah, well, actually, it's one of the easier matches to put out there. But the biggest thing to me, I was shocked I was going to win of all the people they had on the card. And that's obviously the biggest feather I have in my cap is the Royal Rumble. For me to win that, I was in shock pretty much the rest of the night. But as the mechanics of a match, it's very easy. You just got to know who goes out before you and then who puts you out. So if Lanny goes out before me, when I see Lanny go out and you're putting me out, I come over to you. I'm like, JP, put me out.
Right.
So it's mechanically, it's a very easy match. But to make it look good, that's why those guys are the best in the world. And I tell kids, they come up to me and they're like, hey, I want to be a WWE wrestler. I'm like, well, great. Chase your dreams, because who would have ever thought Daniel Bryant would have made it? I look at that kid, I'm like, there's no way in the world this guy's going to make it. But there's a guy who had the heart, the desire, the work ethic, and obviously became a huge star. So I tell kids, chase your dreams, but also remember this year in the NFL, there's 1,500 NFL football players. There's 600 NBA basketball players. There's probably 100 WWE wrestlers on contract. It's very, very competitive business. And the odds of making it, you got a better chance to play Major League Soccer. Just a numbers game,
That's right. And you got to have heart, work hard, and hopefully get over in the process.
And be in the right place at the right time. Yeah, you got to be
right.
in the right place, right time. It's not like some sport where you say, okay, if you can got a 36-inch vertical jump and you can run a 4-flat, whatever, and this kind of bench press 500 pounds, you got a good shot at making it. That doesn't work in wrestling. Who would know a guy with a piece of wood and yelling hole would work? Ric Flair, the nature. It doesn't. You don't know what's going to work and what's not. It's different in other sports, in sports entertainment. And I tell you, like nowadays, the trend. Back in the day, big, powerful, strong men, earthquake, typhoon, one-man gang. You don't see that kind of guy, body type anymore. Everybody's bald-headed, sleeve tattoos, great abs. They all look like bodybuilders.
Yeah, you've got two types. You got the bald guys with beards, or you got the long hair with beards. You don't have the big guys 500 plus much anymore.
No, and plus they have the training facility down there in Orlando, and they have the guys doing 500 squats and 100 push-ups. Those 300-pound guys aren't going to do that. I mean, of course, they do have that new big giant kid, but in general,
if you got a wrestler nowadays who looks like they're not physically fit, they're going to get a lot of flack. But everyone out there, they can go. It's just a different time now.
Yeah, well, that's the trend to guys that fly and guys with bodies. People say, Hacksaw, what was your favorite move? I said, I kick and punch. What are you talking about? I'm a brawler. I'm not a wrestler. And but now the trend is for the in general, the smaller guys that do the high flying stuff and have some really fancy, neat costumes.
Now, would you say because of the fact you were more of a brawling type and not doing a lot of high-flying moves, that this helped you not get as many significant injuries over the years?
Sure. Yeah. So I had my share of injuries, 10 overall surgeries. I mean, but nothing replaced. But knees, elbows, ankles, shoulders. You got big men flying around on television in front of thousands of millions or maybe millions of people. So everything's pretty live, You just try not to hit the X-ray, but everything else is. So when you guys got 300-pound guys colliding out there, injuries happen, and that's what people say. Actually, I saw you throw a punch. You missed the guy by 6 inches. I said, yeah, but you see, when I hit him by 6 inches, it goes both ways, brother.
Now, you had a lot of feuds when you were in WWF and WWE. You had the Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkov, King Harley Race, Andre the Giant, Honky Tonk Man, King Haku, the Macho King Randy Savage. You had a lot of feuds with kings, by the way. Yokozuna, Shawn Michaels, Edge, Randy Orton, and a host of others. Now, if we had enough time, we could break down each of those feuds and you'd have a chance to talk about your best moments and memories of each. But of the many, and of course the feuds that I missed off that list, what were amongst your favorites and why? Because impressively, you were able to wrestle in many different eras of wrestling.
Well, as we were talking earlier, the Royal Rumble is probably the biggest feather in my cap, and with most folks, say, well, that's probably your most memorable thing, but not really. It's like I said, though, it's my largest accomplishment. But as a kid, I'm from upstate New York, a small little town about 200 miles north of New York City. And as a kid, my dad would bring me down to Madison Square Garden to see the circus. So as an adult, to drive up and pull in front of Madison Square Garden, see Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Andre the Giant. I mean, it was a huge double whammy, to be main event at the Madison Square Garden, but to be in there with Andre, it was a thrill of a lifetime.
How was Andre to work with? Because I've heard mixed stories. If he liked you, he was easy to work with in the ring, but if he didn't, he made your life miserable.
I had a good rapport with Andre. Actually, if folks think back, Andre was really instrumental in my career. He elevated me from like a mid-card guy to a main event guy.
Right.
As a young guy, actually, I worked Andre when I was working for Maivia back in like 1979, 1980 over in Hawaii. And I was wearing a mask over there. I wrestled as a convict. And, of course, all the top guys would go over to Japan to work, but on their way back, they would stop and do a show for Maivia in Hawaii and stay in Hawaii at the Circle back in the hotel the guys all used to stay at back in the day. So I worked as a very young man. I got to work with Andre. So I had a little bit of rapport with him. So then, flash forward to the WWF. And I forget which show it was, but Andre went down to he stands in the middle of the ring and he's like, I challenge anyone. And they're like, Duggan, get your 2x4. Come here. So I ran down there, and I ran down. I put my chin on Andre's belly, looking up at him, and I'm like, "I'm not afraid of you." And when he went to grab me by the throat, he kind of missed, and just his thumb hit my lip, my upper lip, and knocked my lip right off, just like if somebody punched me. My lip just fell down. So now blood is just cascading down my chest. It's just pouring down my chest, and Andre's got me by the throat. And he's choking me down. He's choking me down. He's choking me down. Time I feel around on my 2x4. I get it. I hit Andre between the eyes. Boom! He goes down like a huge redwood tree. WWF goes off the air. Me standing over Andre the Giant, covered in blood. 2x4 in the air. Oh! And obviously that was a huge push in my career. And, if Andre didn't want to do that, he wouldn't do it if he didn't want to do it.
I believe that was from the Superstars taping April 2nd, 1988, if my Google machine is correct.
I won't question you, brother.
But yeah, we did a show on Andre a couple weeks ago, and what we came to realize was if he didn't like you, he made your life hell, and he would terrorize you out there, and if he liked you, then you guys had good matches. Did you have any stories of hanging out with him outside the ring?
Not too much. I know obviously he drank a huge amount. Him and Arnie Skolin were friends. Arnie was a good friend of mine. But Andre, sometimes he could be a playful giant, which is better than having an irritable giant, I'll tell you.
Right, that's
true. I used to joke. I said, I'd get on the airplane, I'd be sitting next to a businessman, he'd look over at me and go, I had a rough day at the office. I'd be, brother, let me tell you, I just got done with a giant. He still had villagers in his teeth from the night before, that was about a rough day. But Andre, especially guys with long hair, he used to like to punch you and knock you down. Of course, your hair would go on the mat. He'd step on either side of your head, stand on your hair, and grab your arms and pick you up. So it's a real unique way to have your hair pulled, I'll tell you. When Jake used to come back to the dressing room, his hair would be sticking straight up. He'd be going, I hate when he does that. I hate when he does that.
Yeah, he used to say that it was like the sound of like piano strings popping. Terrible.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, I'd like to say I had a good rapport with Andre, and thrilled to have worked with him, man. I mean, it's like ask folks, you've seen Princess Bride, and they're like, oh yeah, the movie, yeah, and the perfect casting. You need a giant. Get Andre. Because like the Big Show and Strom and these guys they have now, they're like big, well-proportioned men, like Shaquille O'Neal, But Andre was a giant.
Did you ever get disappointed with his hygiene when you worked with him?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you, of course, it was a tough life for a guy being that big, he was, he couldn't sit on the toilet. Sometimes the toilet seat would break. He couldn't fit in the showers. He never washed his gear. So as Lanny put it, he's probably not the most hygienic guy around. He had a unique aroma.
I was going to suggest that he go to the car wash, but I feared for my life, so I didn't mention it.
Because it had to be a tough life for the guy. I mean, everywhere. I mean, even Hogan could kind of disguise himself. Most of us can, even back in the heyday, you can kind of disguise yourself if you wanted to. Everywhere he went, he was, really, put your hand up. Let me see how big your hand is. I mean, lonely life for a guy. As you know, I think. Tim White, right? Timmy used to be his payoff guy. He had been known to break people's cameras and stuff. Tim White would, pay him off because people would take pictures without asking. And I'm sure he'd get tired of it. I was with Hogan there when he was doing those Hogan and Friends things. We were out and I joke, because people are excited to see me, but Hogan or somebody like that be behind me, like, get out of the way, Duggan, it's Hulk Hogan. Pie face me. But we were flying out early in the morning out of, I think it was like Albuquerque, right? And we had been up all night when we got to the airport. And it's like 6 o'clock in the morning, and people are like, it's Hulk Hogan. And everybody's like in a semicircle taking pictures of the guy. And I'm finally to the point, I'm like, hey, folks, give the guy a break. Man, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. And Hogan, he's like, and it's just the deal, Jim. And I'm like, we all work to get to that point. But it must be hard to be, that recognizable all the time. Yeah, I'd say, I met so-and-so, he had a bad day. Or no, he was really a jerk. I'm like, well, yeah, you know what was going on in his day, though? You know, his plane might have been late. He's been on the road for 10 days, hasn't had a good meal. Yeah, I mean, he might be a little grouchy. Any of us.
You know, you hear about these fans who complain online about when they met their wrestlers, their heroes, and they were a bit grouchy with them. And it's like, of course they were grouchy. You went up to them at a gas station or in the airport. Leave them alone.
Tell you, it's nothing nicer to get out and come off an airplane and see the standing there with, you know, the encyclopedia and the action figures and stuff like that. I mean, you know, that's you know, like, especially this long after the heyday, to be remembered and people care about, you know, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all that. I know when I first got the Pipe, God bless him, Piper was alive. You know, I called him like, Piper, I said, I can't believe it. I got 100,000 followers on Twitter. He goes, Duggan, I got 500,000. Like, I'll talk to you tomorrow, Pipe.
Well, in my opinion, and I've been in the business many years, nobody in the wrestling business has more patience with the fans than Hacksaw Jim Duggan. You treat people very nicely.
Well, thank you, Lanny. Like I said, it's as you've been in movie situations with fans that you have affected over 20 years ago, that you've had an effect on their lives, and you don't realize what that effect is. I mean, you don't realize, and to have people come up and convey, you know, things to you, it's humbling.
You know, of course, when you look at it on the other side of things, when you're in the public eye, you have fans coming up to you all the time asking for pictures, asking for an autograph. And as humbling as that is, you know, wrestlers are human and they need that time to really shut off on their days off, and you don't really get a chance to do that. Did you ever struggle with finding a bit of peace during your time off?
Yeah, but it's a, you know, it's a slow window. I mean, like I said, I did what they call it, fan access at WrestleMania, and of course they fluctuate their talent, right? So with Sasha Banks, I replaced Sasha Banks. I never got booed like that since I was a heel. It's a small window, so, you know, enjoy it and appreciate it. And these folks are spending their hard-earned money to say hello to you. At least you can do is, hey, how's your day going?
You called me a dago?
Well, I called you worse than that, but we're...
Oh.
And that was a nice one.
Yes.
It's funny, you mentioned Sasha Banks. There's hilarious pictures of her online meeting fans, and she looks absolutely miserable in them.
Oh, really? Yeah.
She's got this face like, get me out of here, you know. So, of course, if you catch somebody at the wrong time, you know, you're not going to get the best side of them, but they're only human.
Yeah. Well, some people believe their own press, too, you know. I mean, it's only human nature. You work very hard to get there. To get to that point, you're on TV, you have action figures, people, you have fans. It's only human nature to get the big head, but come back to reality. And sometimes it takes folks a little bit longer to come back to reality. You know, I joke, I said, Magnum PA, I think he's still running around. I'm Magnum. So you got to, you know, it's don't believe your own press.
You were talking about Andre having bad hygiene for being a big guy. What about Yokozuna? You've been at the receiving end of a bonsai drop. How was it working with him?
Yeah, Yoko. Yeah, like I said, if there's a giant in our business, Yoko, Big Show, Kali, Andre, Duggan, get your 2x4. I have to wrestle every giant there is, you know, Umaga. But yeah, I get along with most of the guys. Very few guys I've had trouble with in wrestling. Like I said, Matt Borne and I didn't get along. But I think 98% of the guys I get along with pretty good in the show. And me and Yoko got along. Because he's not your opponent. He's your partner.
Right. He's
the guy you're wrestling with. So if you hurt him and he's out of the angle, you're out of the angle. If he hurts you and you can't do it, then he's out of the angle. So you got to take care of each other. You guys are both involved in a part of the show. So the guy's not your opponent. He's your partner.
How was he backstage? Was he a nice guy to be around?
Yeah, Yoko, I tell you, some of my favorite keepsakes. Lanny might remember him back in the day. Slaughter. We used to make these big, elaborate, we used to play cards because we had so much time to kill, you know, back in, you know, they had doing 3 hours of TV. And we had these elaborate brackets where if you lost, you went in the loser's bracket, you could work your way back up. I have 2 that I had won over the years. My favorite keepsake, because it's guys, you know, Mr. Fuji, Yokozuna, Andre, Kurt Hennig, Big Boss Man. It's cool to see everybody's names like that. Everybody wrote in their own name, you know.
Yeah, reminder of the past.
Lanny, I don't think you played much cards, did you, buddy?
No,
you're
I don't.
A student of the
I'll tell you
business.
what, I never played any cards. My brother was a card shark, and he could have me naked in 30 seconds.
Me and your brother played some chess. Your brother played chess, too. We were, I think, the only two in the wrestling dressing room. Other guys didn't even know what the chessboard was.
Right. You know, I played chess against the computer, and I lost, but I beat the shit out of it at kickboxing.
You mentioned getting along with most of the guys in the back, which is great. You compared Matt Borne being one of the few you didn't. What about someone like Buzz Sawyer? What was your experience like working with him?
Oh yeah, nobody have pressure points, kid. Yeah, Buzz and I didn't get along too well neither. No, and Manny Fernandez probably if you're going to make the 3 and out. But yeah, Buzz and I. That's why there's a lot of footage of me and Buzz working in Mid-South, and it was pretty much a shoot. Just to finish was a work. The rest was all pretty live. We beat the hell out of each other.
Earlier, you mentioned being good friends with Haku or Meng. There's a bit of folklore around him as being one of the toughest guys in professional wrestling. In fact, you know, there's stories of him gouging eyes out in bar fights. You definitely don't want to be on the other end of a fight with him. Tell us some stories about him.
Well, you know, the dressing room in general was a snake pit of tough guys. I mean, it was kind of like the old mutual assured destruction. Nobody's going to beat nobody's ass in a wrestling dressing room. You might win a fight, but you're not going to kick nobody's ass because the other guy's going to get his in too. There's everybody. So that's why nobody wanted to fight anybody else because you're not going to walk away clean. You're like, I kicked this guy's butt. I mean, the guy didn't know how to fight. If you're fighting another man that knows how to fight, it's not a, you know. But anyway, but Haku was a tough guy among tough guys. He, of course, you know, the Polynesian race of people is a large, tough race of folks, and the most caring, giving folks you can know. And Haku I've known for, like I said, since '79. But the guy was a jerk magnet. You know, you'd be in a bar, and one jerk and the whole place would come over to Meng. And he'd mess with him, you know. And then grab him and go, you know, first I kill you, then I eat you. And I grabbed the guy. I'm like, buddy, come here. And he said, you know, it's not a stretch for this guy to take a bite out of your liver. I'd leave him alone. But he was assaulted in a hotel bar in Maryland, Baltimore, and he bit the tip of the guy's nose off. And, of course, the guy sued him and almost ruined him financially, you know. But the you know, the guys, all the witnesses said he started it, but Haku used excessive force. I think they had to wait 2 or 3 days for the evidence.
Okay, I get it.
But yeah, good man. Last guy you want to mess with, but I mean, a good-hearted and barbarian too.
Tell us about how you first met Randy and Lanny.
I think Mid-South.
You met me in Mid-South, yeah.
But yeah, Randy, I don't think I met at WWF. I don't think if we crossed paths, I was just Jabroni Joe back in the day, and he might have came through. But yeah, Lanny and I, we had fun down there in Mid-South. That was a fun dressing room, and pretty much everybody got along there. There was a little heat every once in a while, but.
Did you two ever have a match together?
In Shamokin, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Shamokin, Pennsylvania. You and I had a match together because Macho Man.
Was late. Yeah.
Yes, he was late for the first time, and of course, I was finally getting my break as the Genius, and I was very thrilled with that. You know, like, wow, this is my big chance. So, but if I were any kind of a man, I would have gone up to Chief J. Strongbow and I would say, why don't you give Randy a chance to get here since he's never late? Why don't you just put him on last with Duggan and put the tag team match, you know, on this where it belongs? Of course, I would have been fired for just impropriety, right? So,
I would.
You think I did the right thing by not suggesting that to the chief?
Yeah, I don't think that would have been your spot, Lanny. I mean, you shouldn't take no heat for that. No, Strongbow was going to do what he was going to do no matter what you said. So,
So anyway, you and me are in the ring, and we got sensational Sherry, ho, everybody. Now it looks like a queer hiding from a whore, and then a whore hiding with the queer, and then but nobody made any contact for about 10 minutes, but the people were enjoying it. So
Pro
every time
wrestling.
every time you got Sherry, I would sneak up behind you and then whoa, and then I would get scared of you, and it was so much fun, and then our fun was ruined with bam, 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 bam on the window. I see Randy's face, and I go out of the ring, and I open up the door, and he says, "Is this the last match?" And I said, "No." He says, "Who's the agent?" "Strongbow. He's dead." He says, "Take my shit and bring it back to the dressing room." And Randy goes in the ring and wrestles you, and then he comes back.
Attacked me. Are you kidding? He was so fired up.
So anyway,
You got the easy part. You took the stuff back to the dressing room. I'm in the ring with him. I'm like, I'm not Strongbow.
so he comes back to the locker room in Shamokin, Pennsylvania, and he says, "I've been here for 5 years, and this is the first time I've ever been late." He says, "You just don't like me, do you?" You could have put the tag on.
He's talking to Strongbow. Yeah, talking to Strongbow.
He's telling Strongbow, "Yeah, you just don't want me around. I've been nice to you, and evidently you don't like me, so blank you, and that's it." I was very happy that by the time they got to Allentown for the double shot, cooler heads had prevailed, because I just hate having a lot of animosity in the locker room. You know what I mean? It's like, I just don't like the heavy feeling of.
Yeah, it kind of goes through the whole dressing room. You feel the whole, when it's a light dressing room, everybody's having fun. Usually back in the day, if you had any trouble, they'd take it back to the shower. That's where Brody got stabbed to death, right in the shower.
Oh my God, yeah. And I'll tell you what, I met Brody in 1975, and he was an excellent person. The thing is, he had a reputation for being he was a bully.
He was a bully. Yeah, he was a bully. He sure was.
He was nice to me.
Guys.
He was nice to me, but I knew he was a bully. I had already heard about it, and I saw him in action. He would beat people up and then take their spirit, and eventually, you're going to meet a guy that's maybe not as tall, but has a big knife.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. He definitely was a bully with a lot of folks. He sure was. And he had a lot of bullies, the guys that would fight him back, he would never really mess with.
Well, you knew him better than I did, and like I say, I liked him a lot because he was always nice to me.
Well, yeah. Well, I seen him where he definitely took, he didn't take advantage, just beat people up, like you said. He was just a big bully, but he was obviously one of the best big wrestlers. Him and Stan Hansen, of course, are noted in Japan to this day for their tag team run over there, being so stiff. I didn't really like Japan. I know I've been over there probably 10 times or so, but I never, both my two best friends, Gordy and Doc, they made a career out of Japan pretty much.
Before we let you go, we got a couple fans who wrote in some questions. Do you have some time for us to get through some of those before we let you go?
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Okay, Tony wrote in and he asked, where did you get the idea for your iconic ho?
You know what? I tell folks one time I got this big giant splinter in my thumb, and I stuck it up in there. I went, oh! That's my story. That's a good wrestling story. But actually, as a heel, I used to just yell at the people, and they yelled back at me, and it just kind of evolved into the whole. And I just enjoy interacting with the folks, and the whole was working. I said, but you got to be careful hoeing in New York.
Yes, that's right. Eric has a two-parter. It's a bit of a sensitive question. I hope you're comfortable with answering. The first one is, what are your thoughts on Bill Watts? And considering the trouble you got in being caught with your in-ring enemy Iron Sheik in a car while with the WWF, do you feel Bill Watts was right with separating the faces from the heels off camera?
Yeah, I think Bill was instrumental in a lot of guys' career. I think maybe 80% of the WWE Hall of Fame guys came through Mid-South because you'd wrestle probably 9 times a week. You do individual interviews for every city. If you didn't do it right, you do it over. He was a taskmaster and another bully. We're talking about bullies. Watts was a bully. But I learned a lot there, and he was instrumental in my career. And on the kayfabe deal, yeah, I think Watts was definitely right on it. I was definitely wrong on it. It was a huge mistake, but I was over 21. I got to take responsibility for it. But, I was lucky to survive it professionally. It would have killed a lot of guys' careers, because that was right after WrestleMania 3, where I was in front of 90,000 people. A couple of weeks later, the Sheik asked me for a ride, and we get pulled over. I had a little pot with me, and I was drinking while driving, because they pulled me over. I'm like, well, what's the problem, officer? He goes, you're drinking a beer. And I'm like, yeah. This is illegal in New Jersey. I'm like, oh, I live in Louisiana. It's legal down there. Of course, then they searched the car. I had some pot on me. The Sheik had 3 grams of cocaine, and the story, of course, got blown way out of proportion. But remember to this day, my first call was to my dad. God bless him. He was still chief of police, so he asked me about the cocaine. I said, no, sir, I didn't get arrested for cocaine. I got arrested for marijuana. So he kicked my butt for a minute. But then my family rallied around me, because they realized what a huge blow to my career it was. My second call was to Vince McMahon, and I tell folks, I'll remember to the day I die. I got right through Vince, and I said, he goes, Jim? I said, yes, sir, Vince. He goes, Jim, what have you done to us? And I said, Vince, I'm embarrassed and ashamed. He said, turn in your tickets and go home. Boom, he slammed the phone down, because we used to have a big stack of airplane tickets. So, I went from in front of 90,000 people to being fired home. And I went home, and I wasn't married yet. My girl, Deborah, who stuck with me when I went off the deep end for a little while, finally decided I had to go back to work. I called Dusty down at WCW and set up a meeting to fly to Atlanta. But Vince called me back and said, hey, we're going to bring you back. Don't do nothing drastic. Just lay low for a little while. And they brought me back, but they never put the big gas on me. They kept me strong. They kept me okay, but they never put the big gas on me. I joke, I was never world champion. I was never tag team champion. I was never intercontinental champion. I was lucky to win a match, brother. Oh! But that's the deal, because I could get beat, because I don't care if I win the match, long as I win the fight, tough guy. So I could put Flair over 1, 2, 3 in the middle and get up and get my 2x4, hit him, hit the referee, chase the timekeeper, and keep my steam up. So I didn't really need a belt, but I never got the big push after that bust with the Sheik, brother.
Despite not winning any belts, it doesn't matter. You won the hearts of the fans.
I hope so, because they've won my heart.
We're going to go to one last question, which comes in from Ron. You were main eventing the Mid-South/UWF territory before heading over to New York in '87. What was the money like in comparison between Watts and McMahon?
The money obviously was better in WWF. But Watts, because when WrestleMania came, Junkyard Dog left. So that bumped me up to the top babyface spot in Mid-South. And I was making probably $3,000 a week back then, which was good money back in the day. But then WrestleMania 2 came around, and Vince came down and grabbed Jake the Snake Roberts for WrestleMania 2. Jake calls me and said, you need to come up. I went up for WrestleMania 3. So, yeah, the money was better in WWF, but also the cost of living was much higher working at WWF. And, of course, in Mid-South, it was a lot of driving. It was, 2,500, 3,000 miles a week driving all throughout the Southeast. But, like I said, we were all a bunch of young guys. We'd have an ice cooler in the back, a bunch of sandwiches. You party in Shreveport, then you party in Biloxi, and then you party in New Orleans. It was a fun time in the business. Of course, back then, there's a lot more guys making a living wrestling. There's very few guys making a living now wrestling. Back then, every territory had 20, 25 guys that were making a living wrestling. And there was probably, 10 or 12 territories around the country. So it was a great time in the business. And guys would bounce from territory to territory. And Vince finally came around, started WrestleMania, WWF, and pretty much cherry-picked all the top talent and put all the small companies out of business.
This has been a great interview. Is there anything that you would like to say to the fans before we go?
Thank you so much for all the years of support. Thank you for my lifestyle, and thank you for my family. I mean, it's been a great run. Like, so many people hear the negative stuff about wrestling. For me, I've been with my wife for over 30 years. I never had to go to rehab for booze or drugs. No felony arrest. A couple misdemeanors, but that was back in the 80s. It's been a good business for me, and the reason it's been a good business is because of the fans, and I realize that.
What about those overdue library books that you have?
You're telling the story. You're talking about library books. I already talked to you about what kind of student I was. No library books. You could have got me with something else, but library books. No, man.
If only the younger version of you knew one day you'd be a published author.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. And of course, that the WWE album went gold, so I do a lot of charity events. I'm like, yeah, I have a gold album.
I want to just say thank you for your years of friendship. And, there's a lot of, if you don't say it now, when are you going to say it? Okay, because, wrestlers are dropping like flies. The time is now to say something nice, and I want to say thank you for being on the Genius Cast. I really appreciate it, and thank you for your years of friendship. And if Macho Man were here, he'd say the same thing.
Well, thank you, Lanny. You're my friend, and so wasn't your brother. And anytime I can do anything to help you, give me a call. And JP, give me a hold before you leave, buddy. I know Lanny can hold. Can you, buddy?
Oh!
That's a pretty good hoeing.
Thank you.
Lanny, good to talk to you, my friend. JP, I'll see you down the road, I hope.
I hope so, too. Thank you for your time on the Genius Cast. It's been a pleasure to meet you. All the best.
My pleasure, buddy.
Jim Duggan, what a guy.
I met him in 1983. He used to make me laugh so hard that I thought my face was going to fall off. Sometimes I thought I was going to die laughing. And he still tours the country and the world as a comedian. He's a stand-up comedian. I've also done that about 9 times, but he does it more, and he's funnier than I am.
If there's anyone who's been there, done that in this business, almost 40 years, still going strong.
And he's happily married to his original wife, and that's something I can't say. But, he's got 2 beautiful daughters, and he's putting them through college, and they're all successful, and everybody's thriving. So I'm just saying, because of the movie The Wrestler, you don't hear these stories a lot. You see what I mean? But they are out there. Tito Santana, Rick Martel, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. These are the happy stories.
Comes to show, good marriages do exist.
That's true.
Cartoon world of pro wrestling.
Yep. It's a Barnum and Bailey world, just as phony as it can be. But it wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me.
And with that, we've reached the end of this week's Genius Cast. So long and goodbye. Ho! On one side and you've got Lanny on the other. And also, don't forget the new Genius Glow shirt for sale. You look great in front of your friends and you'll get a shout out on our show. Thank you to all the fans who've written in and sent in your poems that you wrote specifically for this show. That means a lot. You can continue to do that and send Macho Man Clip of the Week suggestions and questions for the show to thegeniuscast@prowrestlingstories.com. We had a lot of fun this week, and we can't wait to bring you a new Genius Cast each Monday, so don't forget to subscribe. I'm JP Zarka, and you can find me on Twitter at JP Zarka, that's Z like zebra, ARKA. That's it for now. So long and goodbye.
You've been listening to the Genius Cast with Lanny Poffo. This has been a ProWrestlingStories.com production. Find them on social media at The Genius Cast, at Lanny Poffo, or at JP Zarka. If you'd like to advertise to thousands of dedicated listeners on the show each week, send an email to The Genius Cast at ProWrestlingStories.com. Until next time.
Oh, yeah!